Do you like to have a big weapon? Do you want to have 2 of them? Well, if that's enough for you, then Fury Warrior is definitely something that you should main in 10.1, because what else is there to life than having 2 big weapons to slap enemies with? Well, I guess there's a couple of more things, like damage, like builds, like talents, like tier set, like actual transmogs and aspects, and all of the things that go with maining a specific spec, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. And hopefully we can convince you, dear viewer, that this is a good option to go for. And hey, if you like these style of videos, considering checking our Patreon pages, supporting the channel, it goes a long way into making this style of content and a lot of other stuff that we do on our channel, so we would super appreciate it. But with that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about Fury Warrior and what it is now. Now, the patch kind of just launched, depending on when you watch this video, so the builds are not necessarily set in stone, but it does feel like it's going to be playing similar as before. So before we actually go into the builds and everything else, what exactly do you do as a Fury Warrior? Well, surprisingly enough, it's not that complicated of a spec. You build Rage, and you spend that Rage on rampages. You build Rage through a bunch of means. The most basic one is Bloodthirst, where you just slap your enemy, heal a little bit, deal some damage, and also have a chance to proc the Enrage mechanic, which is something that we're definitely going to talk about as well. While you build that Rage, you will use Bloodthirst. You will use also Raging Blow, which is something that you probably want to press more than Bloodthirst. And you're going to be pressing it a bunch of times since it has charges, if you're playing at least the current build that Fury Warrior is going with. And once you have enough Rage for a Rampage, you will use said Rampage, dealing a lot of damage and activating Enrage. Enrage is a buff that lasts for a couple of seconds on you, and it gives you extra damage dealing during that window. Gives you haste and all sorts of other good stuff depending on what talent you pick. Enrage is basically your bread and butter window of DPS, where you kind of want to optimize all of your little cooldowns and burst windows that go in it. For instance, you have abilities such as Ravager that you want to use while you're ideally enraged so that it can deal more damage. You of course have Dragon Roar and Spear of Passion and all of that good stuff that go into you doing a lot of burst in AoE and single target scenarios as well. Now, this Enrage mechanic having to be optimized is something that will take a little bit of practice. It's not particularly complicated, but optimizing it and min-maxing it does actually make a difference in terms of your damage output. This is pretty much it. The main difference in AoE, for instance, is that you'll be using Whirlwinds, and Whirlwind essentially makes you cleave your main abilities to other targets as well, and you can also augment this through further talents as well to either make it only cleave your next 2 abilities or your next 4 abilities, or do more damage, or so on and so forth. Now, you also have big cooldowns, because, you know, I mean, Rampage is kind of a cooldown, but not really, because it doesn't really have a cooldown. But you do have Recklessness, which is kind of the bread and butter of Fury Warrior. That makes you deal 20% increased critical strike chance and generating 100% more rage from all of your abilities. A pretty beefy ability that will essentially make you burst. And as with the actual Enrage window, you will want to kind of pair this up with a bunch of other stuff. For instance, Ravager, if you're playing the current build or the Season 1 build or a similar build to it, you will probably align all of these together always. So you'll probably pop Recklessness and then Ravager right after for the most amount of damage that you can do. You of course have Avatar as well from the General Warrior class talent tree, which you can not take if you don't really want to, but you probably should take it because it's really good. Particular with the Berserker's Torment talent. What this talent does is when you pop Avatar, you'll also pop Recklessness at a reduced effectiveness. And this will also augment your actual Recklessness cooldown to make it also pop Avatar at a reduced effectiveness. So this is kind of a gameplay loop that will constantly give you big bursts of damage every time you pop this. So it's really efficient. Of course, you can also play the Spear of Passion, which works really well for Fury because you just slam your spear down, you deal a bunch of damage, and also generate a lot of rage, so you can instantly go into more rampages. And there's plenty more to discover when it comes to your warrior, specifically in the general talent tree, where you have all sorts of cooldowns, all sorts of utility, from stuns to fears to slows to spell reflects to defensive stance, so you can take a lot less damage than maybe any other melee damage dealer in the game. And obviously there's more builds to play with. If you don't want to play like the top of the top, the best of the best, you can still do a lot of damage with all sorts of other cool abilities like Odin's Fury, which has been a crucial ability from Legion that somehow finally made it back into the game. It's not played that much now, but I'm sure there's going to be a time when it's going to become really competitive as well. And speaking of times when it becomes really competitive, we do have the 10.1 released earlier this week, and with that comes with the new tier set, which is actually pretty simple and kind of nice tier set for Fury. What it does essentially is just makes your Rampage hit harder, and as you Rampage you will buff your next Bloodthirst to also hit harder, which it's kind of great because you haven't been playing Bloodthirst. If you have played in Season 1 Fury, you've probably rarely pressed Bloodthirst to begin with, and now you're going to press a little bit more, so it's kind of back to the roots where Bloodthirst will hit hard. And some of the builds that are recommended will probably see you play Hot Steel Cold Blood, which is a talent that we used to have as an Ezra back in the day. Doesn't really matter, that's all the details, but it definitely makes Bloodthirst feel more impactful and more meaty into your rotation. And this is just skimming the surface of Fury Warrior. In terms of its actual playstyle, it's very fast-paced, it's very meaty, it's very visceral. You actually feel really good pressing pretty much all of your abilities. Did I mention that it's a fast-paced playstyle? Dude, my warrior is really low gear right now, and I'm still getting my fingers tired from all of the button pressing. Is that a meme? Do you think I'm joking? Well, listen, if you think I'm joking, how about you just pick the spec up and prove me wrong and see how you do with this button mashing fantastic of a spec. It is very fun, it's satisfying, it deals a lot of damage. I don't know if it deals the most amount of damage, however the devs have kind of been really good at tuning and balancing specs out through the last couple of weeks, and I'm pretty sure if Fury is ever going to be, you know, a little bit below average or a lot more below average, hopefully it will receive some buffs, and it did actually receive buffs I think a week or a week and a half ago. Overall buffs for melee, I think we covered that on our channel as well. So even if you're worried about performance, I think you're going to be fine because Fury is absolutely amazing in all of the content so far. You have some of the most amount of flexibility when it comes to your damage profile. You're very, very little punished for taking specific talents where other people have to spec heavy into AoE or heavy into single target. Fury essentially has its entire kit available off the bat. You're just, you know, fine-tuning the little cooldowns, the little intricacies of the spec when it comes to building your Fury and tackling the 10.1 Dragonflight patch. Aberus, is this spec for you? We really do recommend you actually try at least Fury Warrior before deciding to main it, but if it is piquing your interest, leave a comment down below and let us know. Thank you, patrons, for supporting the content, making this possible. We love you guys, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.